I love the touch. Order, order. Can I welcome you, Home Secretary and Mr Hobbs, to our session looking at the work of the Home Office. We have a number of questions for you, as you can imagine, but just so everyone understands, we recognise we do have a hard stop due to Prime Minister's questions, and therefore we really need to be focused on our questions and focused on answers. So we will be looking at two areas of the work of the Home Office, and the Home Office, we know, is a very, very broad animal that covers many, many things, but we're going to look specifically at issues surrounding immigration and asylum, and then we're going to look at policing in light of the White Paper and other issues regarding policing. So I hope that makes sense, and we're going to start with issues around routes to settlement. I'm going to start with Joni Reid. Joni.
Thank you. Good morning, Home Secretary. Thank you very much for taking the time to come this morning. As the Chair said, I just want to begin on the routes to settlement. As you see it, what's the fundamental problem that your reforms are trying to resolve, and what's the core objective of them?
So the reforms for settlement are precipitated by the issues in relation to the scale and pace of recent migration into the country. So between 2021 and 2024, net migration stood at 2.6 million people, which means that around 1 in every 30 people in this country today arrived in these 4 years. And we've seen particular issues in relation to some types of work visas, in particular with the health and care visa for social care workers, where there was an intention to fill a gap of between 6,000 and 40,000 workplaces, but in fact 616,000 people arrived. So on any measure, the numbers that we've seen in the last few years are unprecedented. There isn't any other equivalent period where we've seen such a large number of people arrive, and such a mismatch between what the expectation was and what has in fact happened. So I think on scale and pace and also the unprecedented nature of what we are seeing, I think it's something akin to signing up to free movement with the European Union. That's the sort of, historic sort of only other comparator that you could possibly look at. I think the other particular feature here is the changes to the rules made in 2020 on what would be allowed under the skilled worker route. Those changes where it was dropped to below RQF level 6 has meant that we've just seen a much bigger range of lower skilled migration as well. So in 2021, only 13% of skilled workers were below RQF level 6. By 2024, that had risen to 53%. So on, as I say, on any measure, these are huge shifts in the type of legal migration that we've seen into the country, and I do think that they demand a new response, particularly as the people that have arrived are soon due to be, without any change to the rules, will be applying for settlement in the next few years. And we do expect those numbers to peak. And as I say, I think it's something like 1.6 million on our central estimate would be the number of people that are applying for settlement. So the scale and pace, the unprecedented nature of it, the particular element around the lowered requirements for skilled workers, I think do demand some fresh answers from the government.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing is really about deterrence more than anything else, and that you hope that it will reduce the net migration numbers. What evidence can you point to that that's the impact that those reforms will have?
So I wouldn't say it's deterrence. There is a particular issue where we've seen a very, very large scale of migration into the country, much more than was expected, of a very different nature to what we've had before, both in terms of the skills range, the number of dependents. I think something like 50% of the care work numbers are accounted for by dependents of workers. Again, unprecedented numbers that we've not seen before. So I think that demands an answer from us, because at the point of settlement, without any change, all of those individuals are of course able to access social housing, access to the welfare state, and because of the lower skilled nature of many of these people in terms of their salary expectations, you can expect that there will be a correlation between those numbers and then those who may then require assistance from the state having achieved settled status if we don't have a change in these rules. So it's not, I wouldn't mischaracterise it as deterrence. It is about managing what has been an uncontrolled wave of migration into the country, and I do think that we have to consider what the impacts would be if, with no changes, all of these people were able to obtain settlement at 5 years, which is what the current rules would allow.
We've heard quite a lot of evidence from various third sector and local organisations who've put the argument to us that this is going to have a negative impact, particularly on integration and cohesion. Is that something that you accept, that extending that length of time will inevitably have an impact on integration?
No, I disagree. Actually, if you look at our paper on the new proposals around earned settlement, the intention is to restore the element of contribution at the heart of the system. I think that our country is full of very tolerant people, very generous people. We're very open, but I do think there is a condition to that, which is about contribution. I think that if people feel the system is fair, well controlled, and that the people that arrive are contributing, and that is demonstrated and rewarded in the system, I think that does unlock actually a greater sense of cohesion. So I would disagree. Also, we are talking about people who are coming here to work. It is not unusual for any country in the world to want to change the rules, change the mix of people that are coming into work, look at how we decide how to fill our labour market shortages, and also to place expectations upon employers that they have to fulfil before they're able to bring workers here is absolutely, I think, perfectly legitimate, that we want to be able to make sure that first and foremost employers try to recruit people from home, that we have a better training and skills offer for workers here before we seek to fill shortages with workers from overseas. So I think it's perfectly fair and legitimate for us to want to have a controlled system that does place, burdens on employers. You can't just go off and bring people in from abroad. You have to play by some rules as well. I think that's fair enough, and I think that's what the changes are designed to do, which of course we're consulting on some of the detail of the proposals, but the thrust of it is to obviously focus on getting a managed system that is well controlled, that deals with a particular problem that we saw over the last few years with such a large scale of workers, low skilled workers coming into the country, and I think that the totality of it can help us rebuild the case for a strong migration system that retains public support.
And the final question from me, how do you distinguish between earning settlement and simply just delaying it? What's the kind of fundamental difference, and how do you see that contribution working?
Well, I think we've already announced that we want to go from a baseline 5-year qualifying period to 10 years, which we're not consulting on. I think at 5 years, we have a relatively generous welfare state. I think at 5 years, that's actually quite a short period before people can be permanently settled in the country with all of the benefits that brings. I think it's right, therefore, that we extend it. And then in the range of proposals we've set out, there are obviously some things that could help you bring that qualifying period down. So if you're a particularly high earner, you've come through on any of the global talent routes, you're a higher band tax payer, you can earn that period down from 10 years to potentially 3. But then the reverse is true as well. So if you do fall upon the state and you end up accessing benefits, that can increase your qualifying period. I think it's showing that contribution, that staying in work, that making a contribution to the taxpayer, your good character, all of these things count towards earning settled status and a lifelong ability to be in this country. I think it's fair that we set some thresholds, that we refresh the thresholds we currently have, and are able to show the public that we're rewarding the behaviours that everybody wants to see, but that actually if you do fall upon the state, if you do end up accessing the welfare state, that you are then, it does take you longer, therefore I think, to earn settlement. At the end of the day, this is a system of bringing workers into the country, so it is about managing economic migration. I think it's fair to have an expectation that those people are therefore making an economic contribution to the country.
But that's really just rewarding high earners, isn't it, as opposed to encouraging a contribution?
Well, I think, you're only bringing in workers to benefit your economy, right? So, of course, you would want to look at earnings in that context. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Successive governments have made the argument for wanting this country to be a country that can attract the brightest and the best. I think that's... it will be odd if we weren't trying to do that. Of course, sometimes we have labour market shortages in areas where the skills levels or earnings capacities are lower. And of course, we have the Migration Advisory Committee that advises on that. But it does have to be in a controlled way. And what we saw under the previous government was a very uncontrolled growth in the number of lower skilled and therefore lower earning migrants coming to the country.
Thank you, Home Secretary.
I think it'd be fair to say that the real increase was sort of 2022, 2023. Have you seen any evidence that ministers had any control of what was happening at that time? Were they conscious and aware of the numbers that were coming in that sort of 2022-23 period?
Well, I am not, as you all know, able to see the papers of the previous government, so difficult for me, being in the building now, to be able to see exactly what was happening under the previous administration. Although what I would say is just the publicly available numbers did show a big increase, and certainly as a constituency member of Parliament, I know that in Birmingham Ladywood I was starting to pick up casework that related to people who thought they were coming to work in the care sector, and actually the provider ended up being dodgy, shut down, took all their money, and then they were left with nowhere to go. So I think it was becoming apparent fairly quickly that the big growth was challenging.
Ministers should have seen that. I was a minister in the Home Office at one point. I know the kind of controls that we had at that time and seeing of who was coming in and what was happening. So ministers ought to have been aware.
I think it's inconceivable that they wouldn't have been aware at all. Obviously, it'll be for them to explain what exactly they knew and when. But even if you just go by the information that was publicly available and you could see the big growths in net migration, I think it became very clear very quickly that there was a different nature to this type of migration in that year in particular.
That makes sense. Peter Prinsley.
Thank you very much. So thank you for coming this morning. So why are high earners more useful citizens than people who are not high earners?
Well, we are talking about a system of economic migration, so I think it would be odd to say that you're not looking at earnings. You're looking for people to come and work, and the intention is that they can support themselves. You're not looking to bring in people who will ultimately require assistance from the welfare state, potentially for the rest of their lives. The point is to be making an economic contribution, and of course we are in a competition with countries around the world for the brightest and the best talent. We want to grow our economy. There are, big sectors, in the tech world, in the development of AI, in our health service, where obviously there's global talent to be hunted after, and we would want to bring them into this country ahead of others. So I think, forgive me, but I would find it odd if we weren't trying to bring in the brightest and the best into this country. And of course, that does have a correlation with earnings as well.
Now, I quite understand that, but the demand in this country for workers is not always for high earners. We have large numbers of people who, for instance, work in the care sector, who are not high earners, but who are nevertheless extremely useful members of society, and we need to be able to attract people to come to work in those sectors. That's my first.
Yes, no, which I do understand, but what I would repeat back to you is that under the previous government there was an expectation of a market shortage for workers in social care of between 6,000 and 40,000. That is actually quite a big range, so it tells you that there's an unreliability in the understanding of exactly what the needs of that part of the workforce are. But there's no world in which you could say even at 40,000 that then you shouldn't have a response when in fact 616,000 people come. That was never what was envisaged. Half of them are dependents. I think it is right to then ask a question about what that means for the capacity of the welfare state to potentially absorb that number of people.
No, I absolutely get that. So some changes have already been put in place, and what I understand is that net migration may be falling to very, very low levels already. Do you anticipate, say by the end of this year, we may be in a situation where we've got more people leaving the country than are in fact arriving?
I mean, I would dispute that net migration is at very, very low levels. It's still really quite high in terms of it. I mean, it's had a big drop from the very large increases that you saw under the previous administration, but it is still comfortably at around over 200,000, isn't it? Yeah. So, which on any measure is still quite a high range. I mean, when I first came into Parliament, we were talking about migration in the tens of thousands back in the days of 2010 onwards. So, I'd say it's still pretty high. I mean, I'm not targeting a particular fall in net migration through these changes. What I'm targeting is a better managed, controlled system that can deal with this very particular problem we've now got of many hundreds of thousands of people arriving in the country, half of whom are dependents. A change which was never planned for, never thought about, and which now leaves us with a big problem to fix.
Lewis Atkinson.
Thank you, Home Secretary. Can I just drill down on this? Is the issue the numbers that arrived, or is it the potential scale of the recourse to public funds as a result of the numbers?
Because I mean, the two are related.
Yes, absolutely. But is a policy intention to, by a set of changes, encourage people who may have arrived to now leave? Or is it to have the same amount of people, that 800,000 a year that you mentioned, staying here but have much more limited recourse to public funds, given social housing waiting lists and other issues that there are across the country?
Well, you know, we're consulting on the precise nature of whether you look at changing the rules on settlement and recourse to public funds. That would, of course, require primary legislation, or whether you simply extend the qualifying period to beyond 10 years for particular cohorts of lower skilled workers. So I think that is an open question, and we are genuinely consulting on that. The policy intention is to deal with a particular issue that we have seen. As I say, I'm not driving trying to get a particular decrease. Some of those individuals will find work and will be able to make a contribution, and we are setting the rules and consulting on those rules about how we measure that contribution, what that buys you on your qualifying period. But if you get to your qualifying period, whatever it might end up being, 10 years, maybe a bit longer, and you've made your economic contribution, you can fulfil the mandatory requirements, you will obviously be able to attain settlement in the country. So we're not trying to prevent anyone from ever getting settlement, but we are wanting to change the rules by which they do that. And of course there will be some workers that are not able to do that, and then they would not have a basis for remaining in the country either. But the thrust of the reforms isn't to say we want a particular cohort to go home or particular numbers. It's to get some order and some management into a system that I think we can all agree got out of control. So
there are a set of communities that would say, you know, we never came seeking public funds, and actually decoupling recourse to public funds to settled status, for example, linking it to citizenship rather than settled status, would be an option that would increase integration and manage the recourse to the public purse. Is that something that is still being considered?
Well, the consultation asks a very open question about whether the way to manage this particular part of the problem is to change what is available to you once you get settled status versus obviously just extending the qualifying period. There are pros and cons to both. On that particular question, the consultation is, you know, very. I am personally very open-minded. If you're seeking to change what happens at settled status, then obviously there's a knock-on of how you manage that. There are already people that have settled status in our country. We're not changing anything in relation to those who already have indefinite stay here. So there'll be some practical questions about which is the better way forward. But settlement does bring lifelong rights, and as I say in the consultation and in the paper that we published, settlement is a privilege, not a right. You know, in the end, this is a privilege for people who come to our country rather than our own long-term residents and our own citizens. So there is a distinction between those two, and I think it is right to see it through the lens of privilege rather than a right.
We're going to move on to some specifics about the consultation in a moment, but Chris Murray with a very quick one.
Very quick question, Home Secretary, thank you. I just want to I can understand your argument about the public cost and about the uncontrolled numbers, but I just want to ask more sort of question about your attitude towards the immigration system overall. So obviously settlement is a really important step, but it's a prerequisite to citizenship. So I wonder, do you want, when someone becomes a citizen of this country, they get a letter from you welcoming them to British citizenship, do you want to be issuing fewer of those letters? are you agnostic about the number of people who make the journey to citizenship? And if you think about those dependents, those kids who came here with their parents as they took jobs in the social care sector, would you encourage those kids to aspire to British citizenship, or would you just be agnostic on that front?
We have got questions on to children coming up.
Yeah.
So just genuine citizenship.
So, I mean, at the moment, once you're here, there are still mandatory requirements to fulfil before you get settlement, but it's much more of an automatic process, I guess. And then beyond that, I think it's a year to citizenship after you've got settled status. So these are quite quick processes, actually. But I'm not seeking to limit the number on citizenship as opposed to settled status. Obviously, if you've made your home here, there's no meaningful difference between you as a citizen or as a long-term settled resident of the country, and there are good reasons why people don't want to lose their nationality of origin, as it were. But the full benefits of the state do accrue with settlement as the rules currently stand. So I think it is worth interrogating the relationship between the two, and again, quite open-minded on as we consult and look to make changes in the earned settlements status space, whether that has knock-on consequences for citizenship as well. For children, again, it's if people are wanting to make this country their home, then obviously we want to provide a pathway to do that, but that's why we want to think about the rules and the contribution that people make as part of that system. My family lived abroad when I was a child. My dad was a civil engineer, so he worked in the Middle East for a period, and for 6 years I was abroad as well. But it would never have occurred to us as a family that we were trying to accrue citizenship elsewhere. So in the end, these are quite personal decisions that families make, and then the state obviously has to set the rules by which everybody has to play. But I don't think we can get into the hearts and minds of other individuals, and in the end it's parents who bring their children over, it's parents who are ultimately responsible for the life choices that then their children have to navigate. I wouldn't say that that's the responsibility of the British state.
Okay, we're going to move on to the transitional protections, and Bel Ribeiro-Addy.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Secretary. I think you've covered what you think the purpose of the mandatory minimum economic requirement is, but we've heard that this proposal will affect a huge number of people, and regardless of the arguments about high earners and the best and the brightest, these are probably the exact industries where we currently have quite large shortages, and those that we called essential during the pandemic. So is the government considering transitional protections for people who are already in the UK that will be affected by this change?
Well, we ask a specific question in the consultation on transitional arrangements. So obviously with any of these changes that there are going to be knock-on impacts. What I would say on the mandatory economic contribution, we're looking at just the threshold for paying national insurance contributions is really quite low, actually. And one of the criticisms in Parliament when I made a statement on these changes was, in fact, that it might be too low. So, but I think that setting it at the threshold at which you first start making contributions, and you are in fact making national insurance contributions at that point, seems fair to me. Obviously, there will be some groups that can't meet that, and primarily, I would imagine, in the dependents, group. And so we will want to consider what, if any, exemptions or additional arrangements we want to make for those people. But we've had something like 130,000, I think, responses to the consultation. I'm sure there is a lot in there about carers, about people with disabilities, women who've had to take maternity leave, others who will not be able to fulfil the mandatory earnings requirement. So we are consulting, and we will look at all of those particular examples and think carefully about what additional arrangements we might make for those people.
Okay, thinking of another group of people that it might affect, would it be fair to apply this requirement to households where one parent is caring for children rather than working?
Well, so I mean, again, I think having published the consultation, there's been, I think, some helpful discussion around whether you look at purely individuals' earnings or household income potentially. So, it's not unusual in our arrangements to consider the income of a whole household as opposed to just one or two individuals within it. Again, the consultation is open on this point, so I'm pretty sure we've already had some strong representations on this point as well. And it could be that you set a minimum income requirement, for example, for one partner. in order to, account for a whole household income system. But as I say, it is a consultation. We are genuinely consulting on these questions. We've done it this way because we know that there will be knock-on impacts, and we want to have considered them properly and carefully.
So there are going to be plans to assess people as households as opposed to individuals?
No, you shouldn't take what I've said as a plan. I've said that the consultation is genuinely open on this point, and we've already had representations making some of these points to us. We will look at the totality of the responses that we've received before we design the final policy.
Okay, so at the moment the Home Office does assess people as individuals, but I suppose why do that at the moment when people generally plan as households?
Well, so the initial proposals are obviously based on individual contribution being the means by which you earn settlement into the country. So that is the initial proposal that's being consulted on. But we are very aware that there will be knock-on consequences for those who cannot meet the test that we are proposing as an individual. And again, as I say, we've received many representations about both the sorts of people that could be affected and also the other means by which we might account for those individuals that fulfills the policy intention and stays within the parameters that we have set of the new system, which is that we want to reward contribution. So as I say, within those parameters, we're looking obviously at the consultation responses that we get.
Thank you. And in the evidence we've received from immigrants, we're finding that they've planned their lives around a 5-year route, that's selling property in their home country, turning down other jobs, delaying having children. Do you think it's fair to these people for the terms of their route to settlement to be changed after they've already arrived?
Look, I think what's fair is that a government and a country should be able to respond to the circumstances that we face. And I think that it's actually we have 2 set-piece rule changes every year, usually in April and then in the autumn for immigration rule changes. It's not uncommon for us to change our rules. These are obviously bigger changes, but they are there because they're dealing with a much bigger set of circumstances. As I say, the numbers of migrants into the country between 21 and 2024 is an unprecedented level. The changes on the skills levels required to come to the country and the numbers of dependents that have arrived, I think does demand an answer from the government. And what you're trading off is a set of potential obligations to people who've come to the country versus your obligations to your citizens and your own long-term residents in the country as well. So there is a choice here and there's a trade-off here, and we're trying to find a balanced way through what is a very difficult problem. And I think that the proposals that we put forward are trying to meet that policy intention. But as I say, we do recognise that these would be big changes. They could have some unintended consequences. There might be groups that we weren't aware of.
I think we can take from this, it's a consultation and you are
consulting. It's a genuine piece of work, and I do recognise that there are big changes that are potentially happening here. What I would say, despite the fact that we're consulting, it is inconceivable that literally nobody who's currently here would be affected by any of these changes, and I think we should just be upfront about that. But beyond that, obviously, we will see what the responses say.
So do we think that people who would qualify for ILR today but couldn't afford to pay the application fee today would be affected by these changes? Would the changes apply to them?
Well, so the basis on which an application for indefinite leave to remain is assessed is based on the rules at the time that you apply. So that's always been the case. I think that was upheld in case law. It's been tested in court. It's been upheld in case law since 2009.
I think a lot of these questions are coming up because of the anxiety of retrospectivity. It's causing a lot of issues. So, yeah, that's the question. So if somebody applied today, if somebody had the right to apply today but couldn't afford it today.
So an application is assessed based on the rules that are enforced at the point at which the application is made, not what the rules were when the person came to the country,
not whether they qualified. It's when they apply.
It's when you apply.
So if they can't afford to do it today, but they can afford to do it afterwards, then
and it's
there
always
will
on
be the
point
rules
about,
at that point.
And that's the point I'm making, that it has been assess on the rules that are enforced at the point of application for many years. That is not a new change. It's not a thing that we've just done that's different. It has been tested in court in the past. There is 2009 case law on this point. It is the rules that are enforced at the point the application is made.
Okay, but just going back to the retrospective nature of it, what advice did you seek when deciding as to whether or not to apply the changes retrospectively?
Well, as I've said already, we've had a very large number of people arrive in the country, much more than were expected, in an unprecedented way. I think it does demand an answer from the government, because potentially, without any changes, a very large number of people, 1.6 million on our central estimate, become eligible for citizenship in the next few years. On any measure, that is a big new number for a country to absorb.
Oh, yeah, no, especially, it's more on the advice that you saw.
So what I've asked for are policy proposals to try to meet the challenge that we've got. And I think that what we have set out in our consultation is a new way of thinking about how settlement is earned in this country, how we might reward the behaviours we want to see, how we might take some time away from people, add on more time if, for example, they end up accessing benefits. It's a system of economic migration, and I think that the proposals we have are trying to meet that challenge.
Secretary, I think we need to move on. So we're going to move on to the impact on children and young people, and we did start addressing that, but Peter Prinsley.
Thank you very much. So yesterday we heard from a number of expert witnesses who spoke to us about the issues relating to children and young people, and some of it was pretty upsetting, frankly. I mean, the single phrase that I went home with was the idea that there was state-sponsored unwantedness. And we were feeling that there were hundreds of thousands of children who were kind of in limbo, who had come here, had either been born here or had come here when they were very young, and their situation was very, very uncertain. So the first question is, what are the justifications for putting children on different routes to settlement based on considerations completely outside of their control?
Well, I mean, we've taken out of scope of the consultation, by the way, those that are in care or who've arrived unaccompanied in the country. There were a set of commitments made in the immigration white paper by my predecessor, Yvette Cooper, on children that have been here for most of their lives and only at 18 discover that they don't have status, so trying to find a pathway for them. All of those things are unchanged by these new proposals. What I would say, though, if we're just looking at the specific proposals in front of us, I mean, the first choice to bring children over is, of course, on the parents, right? So, with respect, what I would push back with is if parents who come here to work choose to bring their dependents over, then that is a choice made by those individuals. Of course, we are the sort of country that wants to try to do right by people, but I think I think it's fair, when these numbers are unprecedented and much bigger than we've had for a very long time, to reconsider what are the benefits that accrue when you come to the country. We will, and again, there is the consultation asks questions on this. We will have to consider the treatment of children because obviously we want to move to a system where mostly you earn settlement as an individual in your own right, and there will be some children that arrive who are older, 16, 17, and at 10 years in a sort of standard qualifying period for their parent. It would be odd if you didn't have an individual treatment for somebody who's themselves 26 or 27 at point of application. So I think we're going to look very carefully at some of those issues and develop proposals to meet that challenge.
If a child came to the UK aged 10 and their parents don't achieve settlement for 15 years, when do you think the child would receive settled status?
Well, that is exactly what we're consulting on. We know that we will need to develop careful pathways to deal with this, the particular issue of children, and we will want to look at those who are older versus those that are younger in this new system. But obviously the policy is still being designed, and we are very open to what the consultation responses will say.
One of the things we heard about yesterday is sometimes there are families where there are several children. And what we understand is that there's a necessity to reapply every 2.5 years. And the fees at every 2.5 years are substantial. And we heard of situations where the family couldn't afford to make the application for all of the children. And they were in the situation where they were having to work out which of the children should have, for which of the children there should be an application, which seemed to me rather unfair on the children. I mean, it's a little bit like the two-child benefit we were talking about yesterday. if it's right for one of the children in the family, it should be right for all of the children in the family.
Well, but again, what I would gently point out is these are children that have been brought in by their own parents in a system of economic migration. People are coming to the country to work. I think it is fair for us to expect that people coming into the country to work are able to support themselves and their families. I don't. That is different to the asylum system. Those are two very different things. And of course, we know that there's a relationship between some parts of our work visa system and the asylum system because of the sheer numbers of people that switch out as soon as their work visa finishes into the asylum system. So there are particular problems there. But I think there is a distinction between a system that is designed to support the economy, where I think you can and should expect both contribution but the ability to support yourself and your family. If you brought your family over, I think it is fair for the state to consider. And I think most of our constituents and our citizens would think it's fair enough to say you should be able to support your family. And I think having a system of fees is also absolutely fair.
Okay. But I agree with that, but do you recognise that the scale of the fees is a problem for some of the families?
Well, again, we have to set fees at a level that is appropriate, and it's a privilege, not a right. I think, again, it would be odd if we had a system of no fees for some people, because we have to manage the system properly. There are fees attached to processing these. There are costs attached to processing these applications. So again, I think people make choices themselves to come to another country to work. There are always rules that you have to play by, and there are fees that have to be paid. I think that is a well understood part of the system.
So there is presently, I believe, a 5-year private life route for children and young people who've spent most of their life in the UK. Are you proposing to retain that?
So we will protect the position of those that are already here and in line with the commitments that were made when we published the immigration white paper last summer. But separately to that, there will obviously need to be a consideration of what's happening under the new system, and we will want to make sure that they are all coherent and sit together properly. Again, that is the point of the consultation. But the pre-existing commitments in relation to children we will fulfil and honour.
I think people will find that very reassuring. So just the last bit of this section is about the equality impact assessment. So what did the equality impact assessment identify as specific impacts of the changes that are being proposed on children?
Well, the Equalities Impact Assessment, it's a living document, so the policy is not yet finalised, so it will change based on the policy choices that are made. It wouldn't be unusual that there will be bigger impacts on some groups than others. The question and the legal obligation is whether they are proportionate in order to meet the policy aim. So I will obviously look very carefully at what the assessment shows once all of the final policy decisions are made. It is also why we are consulting. We will obviously always fulfil and I will always fulfil my legal obligations here. But the key question ultimately will be, to the extent that there are impacts, and we can probably guess that there will be some impacts somewhere, is that whether they are proportionate to meet the policy aim.
And are you worried that there'll be an impact on child poverty?
Well, again, this is a system of economic migration. It is right for the state to expect people who are coming here to work that they will be able to support themselves. If they choose to bring their families with them, that they will be able to support their families as well. So the system is designed to make sure that people are working and doing what was intended, rather than needing to access the welfare state. So again, as we complete policy design, we'll have a better sense of what the impacts are likely to be. But I do, if you just step back for a moment, you do have to start with what are the principles of the system, and why is the system of earning settlement, having come here as a worker, different to what happens to you when you're in the asylum system, because you're dealing with two completely different cohorts of people. There's lots of alignments between these two separate parts of the migration system, but I think it is right that a system of economic migration can show an economic contribution has been made to the country.
We're going to move on to medium skilled workers and adult social care with Margaret Malone.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Home Secretary. I'm kind of hearing a theme through your responses today about fairness to the country, and essentially it's an economic argument, that kind of thing as well. So
the government has said that settlement should be earned on the basis of what you contribute to public life. So I think that sense of fairness would sit well with our constituents. But how is the contribution of adult social care workers been reflected fairly in the earned settlement proposals?
Well, I think that the proposals are fair and that they are trying, I think, to meet the scale of the challenge, which I won't repeat. I know we've got to get onto the topics, but I would just repeat the unprecedented nature of the numbers that we have seen, the huge scale of abuse that occurred in the social care sector. We've had to revoke something like 1,000 sponsor licenses in the care sector. So I think, A, it was right to close that route, which was open to such abuse as we saw. B, so many more people came than were expected to have arrived, and so C, that means there has to be a response. I think it's not just about the fairness to the workers that arrived, but also to the communities in which they live, given attendant pressures on social housing, on the welfare state more broadly, and public services as well.
So then, following on from that, my constituents would see the social care workers looking after people with dementia, autism, contributing, as you say, as well. So then that kind of ties them in to sponsored visas. We had, I mentioned this in a previous meeting, we had all the workers come up, one of the trade unions brought them up, and there's still some very bad practice in the kind of social care with the sponsored visas. But then if these kind of measures all go through as you want, you're going to have a shortage then, aren't you, of workers, and they have contributed, haven't they? So some of these bad practice kind of agents are saying, well, if you don't like it, leave the country after all they've contributed. Do you think that's fair?
Well, I think that we've had a lot of dodgy providers in this area. That's why we've closed the route, and that's why we've revoked so many sponsor licenses. It's obvious that as the rules were changed and we started looking at lower skilled, lower skilled migrants, that those new routes were open to abuse. It's one of the reasons why, in fact, going back to Mr. Prinsley's earlier line of questioning, we do look at the brightest and the best at the top end of the spectrum for skills levels and income. You don't tend to see the same kind of abuse, right? So I think that's why we've taken the action we've already taken. And then the question is, what do we do about the numbers that are still here? We've obviously tried to support some of those care workers who've been left with, through no fault of their own, that providers no longer able to sponsor them, try to find them work elsewhere. We've been working closely with the Department for Health on that. We'll obviously carry on doing that. But in a way, I think what you've just seen proves the point of why we need a new policy answer for what's happened here, because it can't simply be to absorb everybody, especially when you consider that 50%, something like 50% or just over 50% of all of those individuals are dependents, which again is not a pattern we have seen before.
The engagement you've had, you mentioned it with the Department of Health on the impact of the changes. Do you see going forward that your preference is going to be to increase the pay and conditions, or you're going to recruit from overseas? What way do you see this going? Because whichever way you go, there's going to be shortages, isn't there?
To the extent that we have shortages in any sector, of course, the Migration Advisory Committee advises on what those should be, and we will always take that advice on board. I think specifically on social care, of course, you'll know that the Health Secretary has been saying that we'll have a fair pay agreement for the care sector, I believe, by 2028. So there is a need for us, as a society, to reckon with the challenges that are presented with an ageing population and what that demands of social care. And of course, the government will have a commission on that as well. So there will be, I think, bigger changes for social care more broadly. The problem that I'm dealing with, though, in this space is under the previous administration, there was an assessment of the skills shortage that was going to be filled. And actually, we've had many magnitudes of numbers
Between
higher
10
than
and
that.
100 from what you've said, 10 and 100 times the amount.
I mean, it's just, exactly. So there's no version of this in which you don't have to take some action here now, just because even if you took those assessments at the highest level, which was about 40,000, from 40,000 to 616,000 is a lot.
So is Atkinson.
So specifically on that point, Home Secretary, if you say, as you said, that there are 40,000 adult social care workers currently in the country working, accepting everything you've said about that there has been abuse and that no one would doubt the Home Office's work on clamping down on that. But those people who are genuinely working as adult social care workers to the country, the ministerial foreword to the Social Care Fair Pay Agreement says adult social care workers are the unsung heroes of our country, but for too long they've not had the voice and recognition they deserve. Do you think these proposals recognise those potentially 40,000 people who are working in adult social care?
Look, yes, I do, because we are talking about moving to a system where we are rewarding contribution. You'll know that the questions that are open in the consultation, refer to the need for transitional arrangements, potentially for some groups. We will obviously want to consider all of those responses properly, but we're not being fair to workers that are legitimately working, making their contribution in this country, if we also ignore the many thousands that were unexpected or the dodgy practices in this part of the labour market. So I think that it's about striking the right balance. Certainly, I would agree with that. But the reason why we're making these changes is in part to deal with some of the abuse that we have seen. And as I say, when the numbers are so out of sync between what was expected and what in fact happened, I don't think it's possible for any government to not seek to respond to that challenge. And as I say, on the fairness argument, you've also got to consider the needs of people who are already here, particularly when public services are stretched. Social housing is very difficult to obtain. Loading further pressure into the system, I also think, would not be fair or right.
And adult social care is clearly stretched. How genuinely joined up are you with the Department of Health and Social Care on this? I mean, we've had evidence saying the government's about to publish an NHS workforce strategy, but there's no adult social care strategy planned at all. There's no analysis that can be seen in terms of the adult social care workforce. So given again, tackling the abuses of 600,000, that might have come way over the amount, but if there's 40,000 people actually working adult social care that you could presumably assess through assessment, how joined up are you on that?
Well, look, we obviously do work closely with the Department for Health. I don't want to speak for the Health Secretary in terms of his own plans around adult social care and what he might wish to say on workforce planning, the proposals for a fair pay agreement and the other changes in that sector. But I think there is a recognition in government that we obviously do need to move. There have already been some changes on pay and conditions. I'm sure in the future there will be more. But I would, with respect, leave that to the Health Secretary. We have obviously been engaging very directly with the Department for Health on what to do with the workers who have come over and there's been a revocation of licence or the sponsorship hasn't worked out, to try to find them somewhere else to go. There have been challenges with that. It hasn't been a straightforward read across where they've lost one sponsor and we've been able to quickly find them somebody else. So there is, but I think that rather proves that there is a problem here in terms of worker availability and shortage to be filled.
So just finishing off this section on routes to settlement, Joni Reid on implementation.
Thank you, Chair. The Home Office is infamous, isn't it, for being sclerotic, if we're being kind. How confident are you that for whatever proposals you do finally agree on, that the Home Office will be able to firstly implement them and administer them?
I think that's the job in a funny way. Sorry to be quite basic about it, but we are designing a new system. Obviously, I've got to make sure that the Home Office is capable of delivering it, but it's not unusual for us to have rule changes. At least twice a year they happen anyway, and they are often technical. They sometimes require a slight redesign of our systems. They require, further training to make sure that people know exactly what they're doing as they're assessing applications. So I don't think it's such a new thing for the Home Office that they won't be able to do it.
So you're confident then that the changes can be implemented quickly, and that you won't need any investment or support in any new IT systems? I mean, there are proposals that there's going to be further checks beyond what they do just now.
Well, so there's already been lots of digital transformation at the Home Office with all of the attendant traumas and difficulties that usually entails. But I don't envisage that these changes are going to break the system, as it were, and it'll be my job to make sure that's not what's happening. There are some changes that we will probably be able to do more quickly because we've made some of those decisions much earlier on, and in fact even before I came in to the Home Office around English language requirement. We know that we're not consulting on the basic idea of the qualifying period moving from 5 years to 10. The consultation is designed to look at exactly how that is done for different cohorts and whether we need to think about transitional arrangements or exemptions, or a new way of designing the system to deal with some of the issues that will come up as a result of the consultation. But once we have finalised the policy, then we will both be able to do the full impact assessments and on inequalities specifically, and at that point we will have to design the system to make sure it can cope with those new changes. But I'm confident that that can be done.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on with Chris Murray.
Thank you, Home Secretary. I want to move on to the asylum system. And actually, just picking up that point about the Home Office administering such a huge and complex system, you're introducing really significant reforms to the refugee and asylum system. So I suppose my question is, what's your assessment on how those reforms, you're going to be, people will be refugees, but normally it's at the point they become a refugee, the Home Office kind of doesn't need to occupy itself with their case as much. It's the process of hearing their case and hearing their appeal that's taking so long and difficult now. But you're proposing to do lots more checks even after that point. So what impact do you think that'll have on these refugees themselves? And how confident are you the Home Office can actually pull that off?
Well, so I think that the changes that we've announced, which obviously we are again working on and finalising the policy design to meet the aims set out in the Restoring Order and Control document. Firstly, it recognises that the pattern of who is a refugee today is very different to when the Refugee Convention was written and signed and ratified, and that we've seen a shift. So it used to be the case that people would just arrive in the first safe country and claim asylum. Today we know that people move through multiple safe countries before they seek asylum here in Britain, and we know that claims are going down in Europe, but they are going up here in Britain. So I think that again there is a change in the nature of what we are seeing that demands a new policy response, and it's why we made the decision to move to the core protection that somebody gets if they succeed in their claim to be more temporary in nature. And so I think that's the right change to make. What we've set out in our proposals is that in addition to core protection, we will obviously be seeking to make sure that refugees, just like economic migrants, are able to contribute as quickly as possible. And so that's why we also said that we would set up the protection work and study route, which will have different rules, because we want to encourage the behaviour that we think leads to better integration outcomes. I think the totality of that would be fairer for refugees when they're here. It is designed to build on the things that we know encourage integration, but also I think retain public support for having an asylum system at all, which I think is the other part of the social cohesion integration picture. So if you have a system that nobody believes in, no matter how good an individual might be, if they very diligent refugee doing all the right things, if a community is struggling to accept new arrivals because they've just lost faith in the control that the system has, as I say, I think that does demand an answer from government.
I absolutely agree with you that dysfunctionality in the asylum system is what saps public support for refugee protection overall. But I'm just curious that your assessment of looking at the Home Office operations overall is not that that it's the asylum process, like the decisions and the appeals. is that we need to put more Home Office officials, a finite resource, checking whether Somalia still is at war, or checking whether LGBT rights in an African country still are what they are, when we've granted those people refugee protection. Is that really the bit that will make the difference in restoring functionality?
I mean, I think it is right that we move to a system where refugee status is temporary rather than at the moment. Once you are deemed to be a refugee and you succeed in your claim, as you say, that's it. At that point, you have full status here. And in fact, you had, until we changed the rules on family reunification, you're actually much more privileged than British citizens who have to jump through many more hoops of income requirements and so on before they're able to bring family members from abroad into the country. So actually, I think it's important that people don't think what one type of status is somehow much more privileged than others. I think it's right to put that much more into balance, and we will obviously be looking we don't want people to be in core protection forever. We do want people to be able to move into the protection work and study route, and we want them to be studying and working as quickly as possible so that they're making a contribution. We think that is critical to maintaining public support for the system, but do I think that it's right that we assess countries that suddenly do become safe, the war that people fled is suddenly over, the opposition has won? I think that does demand some change, and that's why we put forward the proposals that we have.
Okay, thank you. You've also announced the creation of new safe routes, which is something many have been calling for a very long time. Can you tell us what level or what kind of numbers you think you'd like to see coming through on safe routes, and what impact will that have on the small boat crossings?
Well,
if any at all.
So we're very committed to opening up new safe and legal routes. We've obviously set out proposals for specific routes for workers and also for students. And then the third part of that is a new community sponsorship model to be able to bring refugees into the country. We are designing and consulting with people as we speak, and we'll work closely with local authorities and other community groups in the policy design. As I've already said in the House, I would anticipate in the beginning the numbers will be relatively small, because we will want to prove concept with the model. We want to make sure that the methodology that we've adopted for assessing community impact and community ability to absorb people, that is all correct, and that we're not loading too much pressure into the system. I do envisage the routes becoming more generous over time, but I do think it is linked to the ability to deal with the problem of the boats and the wider abuses in the asylum system more generally. So I think public support for safe and legal routes to be more generous, I think, will be there as long as people feel that the rest of the system has been brought into balance and under control. And I do think those two things go hand in hand. So both to win the argument, but also to make sure that the policy design works, the numbers will be smaller to begin with. I would hope that as the other reforms are rolled out, we are able to grow these routes and that they become more generous over time. As to whether the creation of safe and legal routes in and of itself deals with the issue of the small boats, I think that's less clear. I think that organised immigration crime is a real thing. These people are unfortunately very smart, very entrepreneurial. They don't struggle to find people to put in a boat, and people seem to find the money to pay them to get on a boat. So will the creation of the safe and legal route on its own help deal with the boat crossings? No. Is it part of the picture that is the wider solution to these problems? Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. I'd like to move on to now talk about asylum accommodation. Mm-hmm. So this committee has heard a lot of evidence which is blood boiling, of billions of pounds being wasted in a way that is terrible for communities where hotels pop up, terrible for the asylum seekers themselves. We heard really serious safeguarding concerns, and as we all know, is driving real public unrest. So what is your assessment of the asylum contracts that were signed with these three private companies who have made hundreds of millions of pounds of profit? And there's a break clause coming up later this year. What's your view on whether the break clause should be triggered?
Look, I know these contracts have caused quite some consternation across a number of different parliamentarians. I know it's of interest to this committee. Obviously, I've inherited these contracts, and we are obviously trying to make the best of them. I think the actual contract management itself has improved because we've been able to claw back £74 million in the last few months. I think it shows that there's just much more rigour in the contract management side of things at the Home Office. Do we need a break clause, by the way, specifically to get out of hotels? We don't. But obviously the wider sort of picture, I will have to consider not just on the functionality of the contract, but also on what our other alternatives are. So I think there's... The question is not just the contracts themselves, but what are your alternatives? Because we are, on any measure, dealing with a large housing need. So I think we will have to progress very carefully. But I can assure you, we are I have ensured that the department is sweating the contracts, as it were, and the actual accommodation contracts themselves have been the subject of an internal review, which hasn't reported to me yet, but I have brought in outside expertise to have a look at those contracts and how they're functioning, particularly after we had the issues around taxi usage, but also the wider concerns that you've just expressed as well.
Okay, it's good to hear the contract management's being improved. I mean, they couldn't get worse. But will you be considering, I mean, what investigations are taking place in these contracts about misconduct and diversion of public funds and poor performance? And will that have a bearing on your view of the break clause? Because the problem with them is it was just one massive contract signed by the Home Office, and the subcontracting seems to have been completely unsupervised.
Yes, so look, one subcontractor has been removed. I'm not able to give too many details just because of commercial and legal sensitivities, but one subcontractor has been removed. I do think contract management has improved. There's much tighter grip at the department on the day-to-day management of those contracts. I think the fact that we've been clawing back more money is a sign of that. I'm sure there'll be more to do. It's why it's being independently reviewed to make recommendations about what we do in the future. I'm very open-minded on what we might do on things like the break clause. But our priority is obviously to get out of hotels, for which we don't need to trigger the break clause. But the real question is less what the contracts themselves say on exit, and much more about what are you exiting to. And so I think it's right that actually much of our time and energy is driven on the alternatives and getting that model fit for purpose, whilst also sweating the actual contracts as they are today. And obviously we've got the independent review, which hasn't reported to me yet, but I'm sure we'll make some recommendations.
Great. So you're coming on to what my next question was going to be, which is the alternative to hotels.
Yeah.
So obviously you've started setting up some large sites and some military barracks, but we're all aware of the Home Office's track record in setting and converting military sites. Think of the North Eye scandal, where I think it was £350 million was just burned of public money. What's your confidence that large sites can be scaled up to the level that they need? And when you look at the public reaction to the large sites that have opened, do you think it's working in terms of reassuring the public?
So the first thing I'd say on large sites is partly I think we're in a better position because of all the mistakes that have been made in the past. So there have been a lot of lessons to learn from previous attempts to move into large sites. So I think almost every mistake that could have been made has probably been made. And the thing I'm confident about is that there is a bit more rigour in making sure that we've learnt those lessons from what's gone wrong before. It's always tricky, obviously, to move to a new model and a new design of providing accommodation in this way. But I mean, I think whilst there have been bad experience in the past, Wethersfield works quite well with reasonably large numbers. So I think there are examples we can point to that are better practice that should become the practice overall. And certainly as we're moving to new large sites, I'm very clear that we have to do so in a controlled way and have all of the checks in place before anything happens, that we move, yes, at pace, but not at the expense of getting things right. So it's why, obviously Crowborough has taken some time, but it's now open, but the numbers will start small and will grow over a period of time, which is the right way to phase in the use as well.
Okay, thank you. And then final question is, you had projected savings of 1.1 billion on asylum accommodation. I mean, that is a huge amount of money. But are you on, by 2029, are you on track to make that saving?
Yes, I believe we are. I think we've already saved, sorry, I was just checking, something like £500 million already, and the cost of hotels has come down. So I think in 23-24 it was 8.3 million a day, and in 24-25 it's 5.77. So there are already savings that are being made, and obviously we will want to go further, meet at least what we're expected to do as part of our funding settlement. But you know, I'm very clear that we can't be wasting money on hotels in the way that we are. We do need to move to a more sustainable model. But we've already made a large number of savings here, and I'm confident we'll do more.
Thank you.
Paul Kohler and then Robbie Moore.
Thank you, Home Secretary. I want to press you on the accommodation contracts. They're not fit for purpose. No matter how well you manage them, they will make obscene profits for the providers. The cost-plus contracts giving providers an incentive to keep people in hotels. It's 8 times more profitable to put an asylum seeker in a hotel. Why will the Home Office not excise the break clause, which is excisable from next month, and renegotiate new contracts on the hotels? Because you're not going to get out of hotels anytime soon. The numbers in hotels went up last year, and here it's going down now, but you're not going to get out of them anytime soon. Why not excise the break clause, negotiate a contract that actually works for the taxpayer?
Well, look, obviously I want to make sure that we're getting value for money, not just from the contracts, but from the overall picture on accommodation. I've inherited a position where we've obviously been wasting money on hotels. I do obviously want to bring that down and want to get out of hotels as quickly as possible. That is a manifesto commitment. I'm not setting myself against the possibility of using the break clause. I think it's right that I've asked somebody to independently look at the contracts and how they're performing, but as I said earlier, the question is also the alternative. The two things go hand in hand. There aren't huge numbers of providers in this area. We have a large number of people that we need to accommodate. We obviously do want to get out of hotels. We are going to have to transition to a new system of accommodation.
Money's being wasted.
That will take some time.
We have been asking the Home Office for months now why they don't excise the break clause. It's excisable from next month and nothing has happened. People keep telling us, yes, we'll think about it. Why not has it not already happened? Why is it not happening now? Actively thinking, right, we will excise the break clause as soon as possible, renegotiate new contracts, because these providers are laughing all the way to the bank at the moment, and the Home Office is being supine. It's not good enough.
Well, I mean, we should never have been in the position where we were in these contracts in the first place, and we shouldn't have been in hotels either. Those have been policy choices that have been made previously. The difficult factor in what you're saying is more about, as I say, the alternatives and how you transition to a better model for
not the hotels. You've got to renegotiate the contracts.
Well, look, I think we're just going to have a point of
hotels.
disagreement between us. But as I say, I have asked for an independent review into those contracts. It will report to me with findings. We don't need a break clause to get out of hotels, which I know is the thing that has caused the outcry about people profiteering here. We don't need a break clause to get out of hotels, and we will be getting out of some hotels this year. And as I say, we have a manifesto commitment to get out of hotels.
Why do you need a report when we wrote a report last year? Why not read our report? It's plain and simple there. We've explained the issue.
I mean,
you have the facility, the break clause, and there's simply reluctance to exercise it. I do not understand.
I think asking somebody with commercial experience to look at the actual contracts themselves and to be able to advise me on that is the right thing to do.
Okay. Robbie Moore.
Yeah, Home Secretary, I just want to push you on the figures, because the savings that the Home Office had on asylum accommodation was 0.9 billion in one financial year, 24 to 25. But it's anticipated to be 1.1 billion over a 3-year period. That seems not ambitious enough, given the savings that have already been made. So you say you're on track, but why are we not being more ambitious in terms of the cost savings? And it follows on from the same point that's already been made about utilisation of the brake clause.
Yeah, look, I mean, I will want to make sure that we are getting value for money and making as many savings as possible. So I wouldn't say that the 1.1 billion is, once we've done that, that's it, we can all go home, we're not worrying about savings anymore. I will want to go further if we can. We have a particular number that we do need to meet. I'm confident we will do so. If we can go further, of course we will.
And on the movement to larger scale sites, we as a committee went to Wethersfield and we had a look around the site, etc. And one of the big issues, particularly for me, was the way in which the interview process was taking place off-site and only had been moved very slowly to being taking place on-site. So can we have your reassurance that we're not going to end up in a bizarre scenario when we are looking at larger scale sites where the interview process is going to be taking place off-site with transport costs being paid for transporting those individuals to another part of the country to then take part in a remote interview? We've got to get to grips not just with the costs associated with accommodation, but actually the interview process and the actual application process costs as well.
You're absolutely right, and obviously where I want the sites to be is that as much as you can do physically on site is done there, and that there will be as this part of the estate grows and as we get out of hotels and into more large sites, I think there'll be a sort of rationalisation of what we're able to do. There have been a lot of lessons that have been learnt even since Wethersfield about how we should organise ourselves and how we actually deliver services on site, which I'm sure we will be able to do more, and I will absolutely look at the specific point on interviews that you've raised.
Well, we definitely found that it was much better to have people not travelling many miles to go and
Generally speaking, that is, we would want to avoid that.
Absolutely. Moving on to border security and returns, Ben Maguire.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Home Secretary, for coming in today. If we could move on to the small boat crossings, and this has clearly been the shop front of a system that's been on its knees for many years, and it dominates a lot of the public discourse and the media coverage. We saw year to end 41,307 people crossing the Channel from France on small boats. That's a 13% increase from last year. We have, meanwhile, an asylum backlog of around 80,000 awaiting a first decision, then almost as many, 70+ thousand on the appeals system as well. Can we sort of get some answers, Home Secretary, on when you expect these numbers to come down? Because lots of my constituents, I'm sure your constituents, all of our constituents, deeply concerned about this, but we see these increases year on year. Lots of kind of sound bites from the government, we're doing this, we've negotiated something with China to reduce the dinghies. Nothing seems to be working. Can you give us an update on how you're going to fix this?
Yes, look, those numbers are obviously not where I want to be either. This is an issue of deep concern in my own constituency and my city as well. So I fully hear what you and your constituents are saying, and it's exactly where I am as well. These are unacceptable and the numbers need to come down. What I would say is this is a fiendishly difficult problem to resolve, and it does require a sort of full spectrum response. If there was a silver bullet here, I promise you I would have triggered it already. There isn't, so you do have to, I'm afraid, do the much more, long-term, careful, painful work of trying to resolve every bit of this problem. It's why dealing with boat engines and getting that agreement with China is important. The Germans have passed a law on warehouse storage of boats, because we know that's a problem. Getting another government to prioritise a piece of legislation they don't need for themselves but which would help us a lot is a big thing. That in itself takes time, even where there's goodwill, as we have had from our German counterparts, but other people's legislative systems do take time. The measures we've taken already with a law enforcement approach, I think, have stopped something like 22,000 crossings. So I appreciate the numbers aren't good for where we are, and I want them to come down much more quickly, but without the action we're taking, they would be even higher. And I think that all of that disruption activity, all of those seizures of equipment, all of the cooperation with counterparts, particularly in the north of France, but in other parts of Europe as well, I think all of that helps to manage manage down the numbers, but obviously we've got to go further and make much more progress. And I've had lots of discussions with my French counterparts about more progress that we can make. It is all part of the solution. What I would say on the other side of the equation with the measures that I announced in restoring order and control on the asylum system, that is also designed to deal with the pull factors that we know are attracting people to go and pay their money to a people smuggler and get on a boat and cross the channel and come into this country as well. So we've got to deal with the pull factors. We've got to go harder on law enforcement measures on the coast in the north of France, and then also we've got to get removals even higher than where they are today in order to deal with every part of this problem.
So with all of that in the round, can you confidently say that this time next year when you come before the committee next January that those won't be record numbers, we won't be seeing such a large
January, by
increase,
the way.
but obviously another year will have gone by. Will you be confident in numbers going down by then in all the different measures that you've just talked about?
I would love to be in that position. I can't guarantee I'm going to be in that position. That's because the measures will take some time to come into effect. We will legislate at the earliest opportunity to change the appeal system, to further restrict the way that Article 8 of the Human Rights Act is interpreted. There's a whole range of legislative changes that we've announced, which we are working at pace to draft and get right before we pass them in a bill. That all necessarily does take some time. All of these measures, they're not overnight solutions, they're not silver bullets, but this is a key area of delivery for us, and I'm determined to make progress.
I appreciate that, but given all of those measures and looking 12 months down the line, are you confident that the rise won't be as high as it is this year at 13% at least? If you aren't confident the numbers aren't going to go down, are you confident that the rise won't be as steep as this year?
I'm confident that we'll have made progress on changing the law and clamping down on some of the ways in which the asylum system as currently constructed frustrates removal of people from the country and can deal with things like appeals more quickly. So I'm confident we'll have made some progress. But look, I fully expect this committee and others to hold me to account on what the numbers actually are, and I'm sure I'll be in front of you speaking to whether they've gone up or down long before January next year.
You will. Paul Kohler.
Are you saying you're not confident the numbers will go down?
I'm confident that the measures that we've announced will have an impact and start to bring numbers down. I can't give you a timeline of exactly when all of that will happen, partly because we do have to pass legislation. That all necessarily takes time, and we're obviously dealing with counterparts in other countries, and when they've passed legislation, that has taken time. So there's just some necessary changes that we're making that cannot be done overnight. Do I believe that the full range of policy and legal responses that I've developed to deal with some of these problems will have an impact on numbers? Yes, I do.
Last October, I asked the Border Security Commander and the DG at the National Crime Agency whether you could give any example of how Brexit had helped us defend our borders.
How what, sorry?
How Brexit had helped us defend our borders. This, after all, is a post-Brexit problem. They weren't able to give me any examples. Can you?
Well, are you saying it's a post-Brexit problem because of the returns possibilities under
the Dublin Accord?
Well, what I would say is, I would just dispute whether Dublin actually worked as was intended. I mean, the EU have now themselves created a new pact because their own arrangements were not working as intended. So I would think it's a bit of a stretch to. I'm sure there's lots of other debate to be had about the rights and wrongs of Brexit, but is Brexit responsible for the boats? I don't think that's true. And on returns, I think that it can't be the case that was working if the EU itself has changed its posture on its own internal arrangements.
Why was this not a problem before Brexit?
Well, so I think, look, we used to have people coming across on vans and so on.
Fewer.
Yes, if they're able to disappear though without being detected, you wouldn't actually know the full number is the reality. So I don't think you're comparing like for like there. This is a new phenomenon of people willing to risk their lives to get across a body of water in a dinghy. You've had organised crime move into this area because they've spotted an opportunity and because these individuals will pay a lot of money to get on a boat. So I think it is a new phenomenon. The idea that this has happened because we've lost the access to Dublin and the returns agreement with the EU, I think that's too much of a stretch.
Chris Murray.
Thank you. Staying on the relationship with France, obviously this international immigration, illegal immigration, is an international phenomenon, and France is the country they're coming from. So I wanted to ask, what has your work been with the French? What, the money that we're giving them, how impactful is that? What is the increased enforcement in France doing to have an impact on the number of crossings?
So, I mean, look, I've been over twice myself to meet my French counterpart. I should say counterparts because they changed in between, but I've met both of the Interior Ministers that have served since I've been in the Home Office. We are in regular discussion with colleagues in France. We're obviously renegotiating the so-called Sandhurst Agreement, which is, you know, the financial arrangements that we have with the French. Excuse me. The thing I want to be able to demonstrate with any new agreement, and in fact in all of our work with the French, is that we're able to demonstrate impact, that we are focusing on the interventions that have the biggest impact on stopping people getting in the boats, dealing with the organised crime and so on. So our posture going in is, obviously this is valuable work and it's absolutely necessary, and we really do want to and need to work with our partners in France. But in terms of what we want to get out of the financial arrangement is to be able to show that we are pivoting to funding the activities that we know make the biggest difference on the ground, and that's what we're looking to do. In terms of the broader the approach that the French take, obviously lots of the interventions that are often discussed in the media, they are a matter for for the French authorities and for their own legal system. So it'd be inappropriate for me to sort of suggest, we wouldn't suggest what they could and should do. We're obviously interested in the tactics that they deploy, and we work as carefully and as closely as we can with them as they both design those tactics and deploy them.
Thank you. There's been a lot of discussion around the French changing their maritime law in response to the taxi boats phenomenon and the appalling fact that last year 14 people drowned in the Channel, including in November a 1-month-old child. Yeah. What's your discussions been like on the French, and what is the progress on them changing their maritime law, and what impact do you think that would have if it came into effect?
Well, again, a change in the French doctrine around maritime tactics is a matter for the French authorities and for their own legal system. It would be inappropriate for me to seek to direct how that is applied. I obviously want to see tactics that are safe but which do prevent people from getting on the boats. The fact that we saw the switch to, as you say, the sort of taxi boats phenomenon shows that the other law enforcement approaches on the previous model of the boats was working, and that's why they've shifted to the organised immigration criminals have shifted to this new model. So I think that the tactics can and do have an impact, but it's for the French as they roll out their new doctrine how exactly they do that. What are the laws that the rules that they will apply to themselves as they do so. We are obviously watching with interest, and we want to see a safe way of being able to still, stop people from physically getting on the boats.
Okay, thank you. And are you working with the Foreign Office and other government departments to ensure that that's joined up in all our relations with France? Yeah. I want to ask about the one-in, one-out deal, which is the other component, other big component of the work with France. So it's been going for a couple of months now, about 6 months now, and it has 6 more months to run. You said that France has sent back 281 people to the UK, and we have sent 281 people to France, and 350 have come back to the UK. What's been the cost-benefit analysis of the success of this scheme? Is that the numbers that we need to start making an impact on the small boats?
So the numbers as of today, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, so we've had 305 people go out, and 367 people come in. So there is still a discrepancy between the numbers, but throughout the pilot we've seen, when we first started, those numbers were heavier on the French side than they were on ours, and that has shifted all the way through, and that's usually down to being able to get a flight off with exactly the same number of people on it that we were anticipating. So there's been that challenge, but the numbers have, for most of the pilot, tracked quite close to one another, and these will come back into balance soon as well. So I wouldn't. There isn't too much to read into that. These numbers have fluctuated and changed throughout the pilot. The pilot itself is it was designed as a pilot. It was designed to prove concept that this could be done, that it was possible to overcome legal hurdles, practical barriers, and obviously I think we have shown that it can be done and is being done. There's a separate question I think about what is the total number that you would need to achieve here that could break the business model of the gangs. Obviously, everybody that has been returned to France, all 305, have lost a lot of money. We know 2 people came over on a boat, were returned to France, came over again, and were both returned to France. So those individuals have lost 2 lots of money. So it has sent a signal, I think, to both the individuals looking to get on a boat and also the organised immigration criminals behind them. But it's obviously not dented the numbers yet. There will be a proper evaluation of the pilot as it completes. So at that point, we'll be able to look at everything from costs, impact, practical consequences as well, so that will be done in the normal way. But I think in terms of proving concept and proving that the practical and legal ability to get this done is there, I think on that it has shown that is doable.
So that's very interesting, thank you. And you say that the proof of concept has been established, and that does send a signal to people. So the question is, how is that signal transmitted? We visited northern France as a committee and spoke to the French law enforcement officers there and UK law enforcement. Are we able to get inside the calculus that these migrants are making? Do they know this is happening? Is it pushing through the networks? There was the summit last year on social media and organised immigration crime. What's the update from that summit, and how much is this cutting through?
These people know what we're up to, I would say. There's a high degree of knowledge in the cohorts that we're dealing with, both on the organised crime side of things and also the individuals getting on boats. It's quite common for people when they arrive here in the UK to ask which hotel they're going to be in. There's an understanding of the system that is, I think, quite well developed. So I'd imagine these individuals know it's a pilot, they know that the numbers start small, they know that it's trying to prove concept. So has it yet changed their personal calculus? Probably not. They can see a change coming, that they may well be banking on it not working or not being able to be scaled up. We would obviously want to see much larger numbers. There are both physical constraints to that, and obviously we have to work very closely with our colleagues in France. I think it would be right to say with bigger numbers you could probably see the calculus changing, but getting this off the ground itself, I think, has been one of the first and biggest hurdles to get over, because of course, as you'll know, the minute we started to try to return people to France, we had all sorts of legal challenges, and the nature of those legal challenges changes, by the way, every few weeks. So once you shut down one ability to frustrate a removal because of a claim under one bit of modern slavery regulations, another set come in. So there are constant challenges here. And we keep working through them.
Thank you.
Robbie Moore, very quickly.
But Home Secretary, I just want to put it to you, it feels like it's just not working. I mean, we as a committee went over to France, went to Dunkirk, we went with our French counterparts as a select committee as well. And I have to say that it didn't seem to me that there was any political will on the French side for this arrangement to work. It was even reiterated to us that why would we want to not allow the individuals to get across the channel, and then it's not our problem. So
to be fair, that would be in Paris. That was the French, the central.
But it was still, and therefore still reiterated to us. So I just want to understand value for money. There's £476 million has already been given to the French over a set period, much more recently with the one in, one out deal. When will we start to really understand value for money for taxpayers here in the UK with our arrangement with France, that it is actually working, given the numbers, to be frank, are so pitiful? in the numbers that have been returned so far?
Let me deal with both parts of that. Just on the first one, look, there are problems in the north of France. I mean, it isn't simply a case of, don't worry, their end destination is somewhere else and they cause us no trouble whilst they're here. There are real community cohesion problems in the north of France. There's issues around criminality, the camps, or all of the issues that are connected to that. So I think there is an interest about dealing with this problem. People know that if you're transiting, you're still in another place for often quite long periods of time, and I don't think the French want to have organised crime operating in this way on their territory either, because that brings other problems for them as well. So I think there has been political will. We got an agreement. I mean, that was in itself a breakthrough. We got the first flights off. That was in itself a breakthrough. There have been practical issues, legal issues all the way through for us and for the French as well. They've had to build capacity. We've had to do the same. So, you know, all of these things necessarily take some time, and I think that's why the numbers have been smaller but growing, you know, every month. I think in proving concept, it takes two to tango, and the French have obviously played their part here as well. And I would want to, you know, note and record that, you know, we do appreciate the collaboration and the cooperation that we have had from our French counterparts. We obviously want to build on that. What I would say to you on the money and the agreement, I mean, obviously this is being renegotiated as we speak, and we'll need to obviously come to new arrangements with the French. Value for money and impact are the two central goals that I have for what that agreement needs to deliver, and I'm very focused on impact because the nature of the organised crime activity, their ability to adapt, means that things that worked 3 years ago don't work quite so well now. So we need to be much more agile and try to keep pace with the changing model that the organised criminals employ. So I want to deal where we know we're funding activity that makes a meaningful difference on the ground, and where you have the agility to switch quickly between different modes of tactics and disruption based on how the organised criminals are changing as well. So those are the goals that we have going into the negotiation. It will be a publicly, demonstrated thing once the agreement is reached. I'm sure we'll have discussions about what it really buys for us here in Britain and what it does for the French. But I'm very clear that impact and agility within the contract are absolutely central.
We've got a couple more questions on asylum, and then we're going to move on to policing. But Paul Kohler and then Ben Maguire.
Thank you, Chair. I don't like to disagree with my fellow committee member, but from my visit, or our visit to France, I thought it was very clear there was a political will. There's a resource being put in by the French, and it's having terrible effect on places like Dunkirk. Do you agree? Home Secretary.
Sorry.
You weren't even
I missed the
listening
last
to
bit of
me.
your question. I was about to write what you were saying.
I think there is a political will. It's having a huge effect on society in places like Dunkirk, and resources are being expended. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, we managed to do a deal, and we've got flights off. Flights have been coming in, flights have been going out. That takes big political will and effort, and we do appreciate it.
There is political will. I wonder if there's a lack of imagination. Do you also agree? Let me ask you what might seem like a naive question. If every occupant of a boat, wherever they were intercepted, even if they landed in the UK, was sent straight back to France, what effect do you think that would have on the trade? If they always knew they would go straight back to France?
Well, I mean, I think that would kill the trade.
Right. Now, what are the obstacles to doing that?
So it's much bigger numbers and capacity. So capacity on the French side to absorb those people coming back into an estate, which obviously they would need to build, and then on our side, obviously detention estate capacity as well.
Could we not, to kill them, to kill the trade? Could we not sweeten the pill for the French political position, and perhaps grant 50,000, which you're granting? 40,000 are coming over every year anyway, or came over last year. Grant n number of visas, like you're on the one in, one out agreement, just to kill the trade. Because you wouldn't have to do it forever. You could simply do it.
What you're describing is obviously the the core of what the ultimate treaty was intended to try to achieve. But to get there, I mean, obviously, those are much bigger numbers, and they would be challenging both for us and the French. That's why the agreement
coming over anyway.
But you can't. But what I would say with respect is you can't go from nothing at all to massive numbers overnight. And we were trying to prove concept that you could actually physically get this done and meet the legal. Meet the legal. But well, I think it will. The thing that I think it would be naive is to imagine you could go from 0 to thousands immediately.
But it wouldn't be every year. It would just enough to kill the trade.
No, look, I would absolutely love to be able to return everybody immediately. I mean, the question is, would the French be able to do that?
It's an appeal, enough to kill the trade.
But look, we had to prove concept. I think we proved the concept. There have been, and what I don't think you should ignore or do down are all the legal challenges that we are constantly getting designed to frustrate removal back to France, which is a safe country. Signatures
This is refusal of entry rather than removal.
No, it's for our ability to get people on a plane and get them back to France. So we're having claims all the time. So on our side, we've had practical and legal hurdles to overcome. On the French side, there are practical hurdles to overcome as well. But look, we obviously want to be able to ultimately break this business model. We're interested in all and any mechanisms that we have at our disposal to do that. It does require cooperation with international partners. We are in the middle of a negotiation at the moment, and I won't. Well, it's a point that's been made by lots of others, and you know, Europe in its relationship with Turkey and others have tried similar to try to break different routes into Europe. So it is an understood concept, and is obviously the core concept that this treaty was also designed to try to get towards. Getting to the end point is obviously something that requires negotiation between two sovereign nations.
The COLA concept will be there for you. Ben Maguire.
It has 3 other names at the moment as well, so sadly. But for the purposes of this committee, I believe it could be called the COLA concept.
Thanks, Home Secretary. If we could move on to the Rwanda scheme, obviously £700 million of taxpayer money was spent on that under the last government, with 4 migrants removed, I think it was. We heard when this government came in they were going to end that scheme immediately. Can I just ask, when did the government formally notify the Rwandan government?
I'm afraid I don't have that exact date to hand, so I don't want to give you an incorrect date, but it was understood throughout that
rough month or a rough sort of idea of when that termination was given?
So unless you have a specific date.
But very early after the election, when the government made clear, obviously there's a transition period, we had those discussions with the previous Home Secretary and the Prime Minister, and then we discussed with the Rwandans at the earliest opportunity after the election.
Do you have any idea what that was?
I don't have, I can't recollect off the top of my head, but I think it was
a major project at the Home Office. I'm quite surprised you don't have any idea when notification was given.
No, so
the Rwandans knew that we were always intending to cancel that deal.
I'm asking when the formal notification was given under the contract.
So I can write to the committee with a date for the formal notification. I don't want to misspeak. Oh, I've been given the date, 16th of December 2025.
December? After an election in July? That's extraordinary.
December 2025.
Formal.
That's the formal because it related to the passing of the border security.
That's December 25 or 24?
So it's related to the because you had to suspend the legislation, revocation of the legislation, which happened as part of the Borders Act. So that came in, so that was the formal. That doesn't mean we were not discussing and had discussions. These are obviously matters now that are before the International Court of Arbitration, but there were discussions with the Rwandan government immediately after the election. The formal notification is because it was linked to the repealing of the Safety of Rwanda Act, which was part of the Border Security Bill.
Sorry, so December 2025, the formal notification?
Formal notification post the Act passing into law, but long before that and soon after we came into government, there were conversations with the Rwandans to explain to them our position as a government. I'd be very happy on a private basis to share with the committee a timeline. I hope the committee will appreciate that we are obviously in front of an international court, and so there are, sort of, for matters of legal confidentiality, things that we need to abide by. But on a private basis, I'd be happy to share with the chair what happened and when. But we've received legal advice throughout, and we do believe we have a strong case, which we do intend to defend robustly in the Court of Arbitration. So just also to be clear, we have advice from senior counsel as to our position, and we're pretty confident that we can prevail.
Okay, maybe you can write to us then on that, and we can follow
that would
up
be
on that,
helpful.
because that seems extremely important and quite.
We need to move on, I'm
disturbing.
afraid, onto policing. So we're going to start with the topic of the Aston Villa versus Maccabi Tel Aviv game, which we've been looking at very closely as a committee. Not something we expected to be looking at quite as closely as we have, but you will know we have. And I'm going to go to Paul Kohler.
Thank you. I heard and completely accept your statement on the 14th of January to the House that you were not told definitively there would be no away fans, or there would be a recommendation to ban away fans from the match. However, the Home Office were told on the 8th of October the working assumption is that there will be no away fans. Did you know that?
No, so what I know is exactly as I set out in my statement, and what Sir Andy Cook found in his report. I chaired a meeting of several police leaders. We had a discussion about public order incidents. This is in the wake of the terrible terrorist attack in Manchester. So it was specifically a conversation about public order laws, and then we did some horizon scanning at the end of that meeting. Other chief constables told me what was on their mind in terms of events that were coming up that were posing public safety challenges potentially, and this was mentioned at the end as well in exactly the way I've set out in my statement.
So on the 8th of October, when the Home Office was told that the working assumption was there'd be no away fans, who did know, Mr. Hobbs? Do we know?
Well, so I think that evidence has already been given to the committee about what was said in front of me on the 8th.
No, I'm asking who the Home Office was told. I'm trying to find out who was told, and ultimately, given it was such an important issue, why it was not raised to ministerial level. You weren't told. I'm assuming no ministers were told. Is that correct?
It's my understanding that even on the 15th of October, in an email exchange, it was still believed that all options were on the table. So I think my officials were in trying to get information all the way through about what was going on, and there is the possibility that was raised on the 8th of October. There is also the email exchange that says all options are on.
The working assumption there will be no
That
away
is
fans.
not what was said to me.
No, I'm not saying it was said to you.
Yeah.
I'm saying it was said to the Home Office.
Yeah.
Now I'm asking. That's why I asked.
Then as late as
Mr. Hobbs
the
at that
15th of
moment.
October.
Sorry.
As late as the 15th of October, it was still said to Home Office officials that all options were on the table.
But on the 8th of October, it's there from the UKFPU, they've written it that the Home Office was told a working assumption would be there would be no away fans. What I'm trying to find out is what happened to that information. Was it raised at a ministerial level? Mr. Hobbs, do you know?
I'm afraid I don't know. That is not something with which I am familiar with.
Could you come back to us on that point, please? A note has appeared.
Well, I can write back to the committee. I don't believe the evidence is going to go further than what you've already heard directly from.
It's important. I'll tell you why it's important. Because the Home Office was told it was very likely the recommendation would be no away fans. What I'd like to know is, given the Home Office was told that on the 8th, why they didn't at that point say, hold on, there's an issue here, we can find additional resources, rather than waiting until the decision was made. Knowing it was highly likely, why was the Home Office not proactive?
Well, I think I do have to go back to the doctrine of operational independence. It's not for the Home Office to carry out a risk assessment of a public event that could be taking place. I couldn't override that risk assessment if the Chief Constable... Let me finish my point, please, Mr. Kohler. If the Chief Constable of West Midlands Police asserts, I cannot possibly put this event on safely, here are the risks, I can't override that and say, I don't believe those risks exist. So there is a respect for operational independence that in the current arrangements, I think, does have to be observed. Once the decision was made, we of course asked West Midlands Police, is there a way of mitigating the risks you say exist that we could assist with that would allow this match to go ahead in the way that we would all like to see?
When you were told it was highly likely that was going to be
Because they have to do their risk assessment. I mean, this is why I've asked Andy Cook to look at the whole of the process for coming to these decisions in the first place. There was a deep desire not to interfere with operational independence of the police as they were making their risk assessment, as they were deciding whether the event could be safely put on. Once that decision was made, it was appropriate to say, is there a way around this problem? If they'd come back, by the way, and said, no, there isn't, it wouldn't be possible to override that
I'm not asking you to override
No,
it.
but I am trying to give you the context, because I think that to just take one incident and to try to say we should interfere in operational independence based on our current arrangements, I don't think is right.
And time is limited.
No, let me finish, because I think that is why I've asked Andy Cook to look at two things. First, what exactly happened in relation to West Midlands Police, but also to advise further on what we do with safety advisory groups going forward, because as this event has shown, actually, when not done properly, they can have big impacts for community cohesion here at home and also our position abroad as well. So that's why I've asked for that review to take place. But I do think it was the Home Office officials' position that they were seeking to respect operational independence.
Can I turn to Mr Hobbs on this point?
Well, I'm afraid Mr Hobbs doesn't cover this area of policy, so I'm
afraid
afraid you're asking him to answer on a thing he's not responsible for.
If the Home Office is told something is likely to happen, which will have clear implications on a national level, are we really saying not that I won't interfere, but you won't even have a conversation saying there might be solutions? Is the Home Office not proactive enough to say, hold on, there might be solutions? I'd love Mr Hobbs to hear.
No, you can ask Mr Hobbs. I don't believe he can answer your question, but you can ask.
Well, I'm sure you know. More confidence in him.
In this circumstance, that is not something of which I am familiar and work on. Obviously, we work very closely with the ministerial team, and when things happen, obviously there's a way of notifying. But as I say, in the circumstance you are talking about, I'm afraid I can't comment on the Home Secretary's position.
The officials that were involved were seeking to respect operational independence and not to try to override an independent risk assessment. The problem that this case has shown, and the reason why I lost confidence in the Chief of West Midlands Police, is that risk assessment could not have been relied upon because it was wrong, and it was based on false evidence and all of the other findings that Sir Andy Cook had. So the actual problem here is about the ability to trust a risk assessment made by the police. That's gone horribly wrong in this case. There are two things I've asked Sir Andy Cook to look at. One, which he's already reported on, which was the run-up to this decision being made and whether that risk assessment was flawed, which he has said it was. Secondly, on how we operate in relation to safety advisory groups and big public events in the first place. So is it right that the Home Office never interferes because of operational independence? Can a minister ever override an independent risk assessment or say we wish to see an event take place?
You're adopting the technique of your predecessor now.
No,
if we can
I'm
have a short
answering your
answer, that'd be great.
question with some context to make you understand exactly what happened.
Can I leave it at this? Please, can you write back to the committee saying at what level the message from the UK FPU, what level it was seen at and where did it go? It's very clear what the UK FPU, they told the Home Office, the working assumption was their working assumption that there would not be away fans. We would like to know where that message went, if anywhere.
Well, I will certainly go back and I'm sure my officials are watching, they'll be able to respond. But evidence has been given on this exact point to your committee before by the Director General who was responsible for this team. I think a lot of evidence has been given to the committee about various email exchanges and conversations that took place. I don't believe that much is going to be added to that, but of course if it can be, I will make sure it is.
Thank you, and it will assist us because we will be reporting a short report on our findings shortly, so that would be helpful. If we move on to the wider issue of police reform with Ben Maguire.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks again, Home Secretary. We've obviously heard some of the reforms that you're proposing, that of your department, and we've heard that it will be restoring national targets, setting minimum standards for police forces. I'm curious to know, obviously we've had the Government Safer Streets mission, which is also talking about increased public confidence, having named contactable officers. How will this reorganisation help with any of that? And will it not just add more bureaucracy to...
No, I think it brings, it restores a system that the public can have confidence in. We've seen confidence decrease. We know that neighbourhood policing has been, decimated, and we're seeking to bring that back. I believe good neighbourhood policing is the absolute bedrock of a well-functioning police service, and the reforms are designed to ensure that we always have the right policing in the right place, so that once the reforms are fully implemented, the National Police Service will have the ability to go after, international terrorists, fraudsters, serious organised crime. You'll have a smaller number of regional forces that are able to respond to big peaks in demand, public order events, murder investigations, rape and serious violence investigations. Within them, local police areas whose one job and one job only is to police their local areas and respond to local concerns with neighbourhood policing as the absolute bedrock. I think that this model will ensure that we stop seeing what happens at the moment, which is actually the first thing that it's easy to deprioritise is so-called lower level offending, because it's, you know, monetary value is lower, or because violence isn't involved, and then to focus on the serious offences. But we all know that that lower level offending hurts communities, kills pride in our areas, damages cohesion, damages the economy of our local areas. And I want to make sure that the new model doesn't mean to say that this, you know, good neighbourhood policing, good local police areas focused on local policing gets sacrificed to deal with, you know, peaks in demand on public order or the serious and specialist investigation. So it is designed to make sure that we are always able to have the right policing in the right area, and that every type of crime is covered properly and pursued in the way that the public would expect.
This committee recently met the Greater Manchester Police, and obviously my own force, Devon and Cornwall, have raised serious concerns about increasing huge geographical areas that these forces are going to cover, particularly in places like Devon and Cornwall, which is hugely rural already, are looking at expanding that massively. So it's quite hard for lots of those forces to understand the concept of going back to their communities, being community focused, when you're actually making these forces much broader, much bigger. And if I take the example again of Devon and Cornwall, they're telling me they're £3 million short. They've actually cancelled a front desk in my constituency in Launceston that they were going to open. There was a sexual assault of a teenager there last week. She wasn't able to go to that front desk because it's now been cancelled. So I'm really struggling to understand, and I think the police I'm talking to as part of the committee in Greater Manchester, as a constituent MP Devon and Cornwall, how is making these forces much, much, much bigger going to bring that community-centred approach that you keep talking about?
Because within those forces you will have local police areas that are designed to be community-facing. So the move to the smaller number of regional forces is about being able to meet... Well, it's not happening at the moment because the reforms aren't in place, right? So forgive me, but the point is the new model...
Is there going to be suddenly lots of funding that's coming with these reforms then? Because there isn't the funding at the moment to have the community police.
Let me finish my point. The new model in its totality is designed to ensure that community policing does not suffer from peaks in demand elsewhere, right? So in fact, it's designed to do what happens in Greater Manchester everywhere, which is there you have a reasonably large force. It's not encumbered with significant national responsibilities, and therefore is able to focus on policing its area effectively. That is a contrast with what happens at the Met, which is also a very large force, but does have all of counter-terror policing for the whole country sitting within the Met. And as we saw from the Casey review, that has an impact on prioritisation and what happens at the Met. And I want to take that national capability into the National Police Service so that the Met can get on with policing London. So the whole point of the totality of the reforms is to make sure that local communities are policed effectively. So wherever you are in the country, whether rural or urban, all of those areas do have good quality neighbourhood and local policing.
And just finally, Home Secretary, obviously these reforms are coming on the back of the abolition of the PCCs. What's happening there? Because we seem to be having PCCs abolished, I think, in 2027. And then obviously these huge reforms are going to be coming in after that. It all feels a bit back to front, doesn't it?
So they're up for re-election, I believe, in 2028. So they won't, those elections won't be proceeding, and the post will be abolished. And look, I've got a review.
Will the committee sit with those reforms? Because obviously taking Devon and Cornwall again, that will be a separate committee, and it won't be appropriate.
I will always obviously want to make sure that we phase those changes in appropriately. Where we don't have directly elected mayors being able to do the policing scrutiny function, we'll have local crime and policing boards, and we're obviously looking at policy design of that at the moment. I've deliberately set out these reforms over a longer period of time, though, to avoid some of the issues seen in Scotland, where they made big changes in just a year, which had a big impact and took many years to resolve. So these are very, very significant reforms. I want to make sure we get them right, and that we do them in a way that means that we do not put at risk operational effectiveness, for example, as we're setting up the National Police Service. And I've asked for, and I'm going to very soon announce the reviewer who will carry out the review into how we transition to a smaller number of regional forces, what the right number should be, and the mechanism by which that change should take place. So there'll be more to say on this in the coming months. But the intention is to phase the reforms so that they sit alongside one another properly, but they will take some time.
Lewis Atkinson.
Thank you, Home Secretary. as you say, you've set out a longer implementation period for changes to forces, and I think, you know, whatever your views on your local force, I think what probably everyone would want to see is not chopping and changing between different governments choosing to change boundaries every now and then on force sizes. So clearly it's been a long time since police reform has been attempted on this scale. What steps are you taking to try and forge a political consensus that will last beyond this government, I suppose, particularly on reflection of previous attempts to change forces?
Yeah, look, I mean, as I say, these are on any measure very significant reforms, and they will take time to deliver. What I would say is, obviously, I've got to go out and win an argument, and we will need to legislate. So there will be appropriate moments as we're seeking to pass legislation here, to be talking to opposition parties as well. And I will obviously always do so, even as we're doing policy, finalising policy design. These are the right reforms, and you know, they've been welcomed by policing leaders across the, you know, across many different organisations, including those organisations that will see themselves abolished and moved into the National Police Service. There is a recognition that at the moment we have a structure of doing everything 43 different ways. It's not a rational structure, and it's not what you would start with if you were designing the system from scratch today. And we can't let sort of difficulty and time get in the way of bringing forward reforms that will deliver for local people. In the end, this is about having a police service that the whole country can have confidence in, is proud of, where the people that work in that service know they are delivering a high quality of service wherever they are and whatever type of work they are doing. So I think there is a political argument there to be won. It's my job to obviously go out there and win that, but I do take comfort from the fact that such a wide range of leaders within policing have welcomed the reforms, acknowledged that something needs to be done, and that this is the right way to go about it.
So when you call the police, they should come. When you report a crime, it should be properly investigated. But I think too many constituents of mine, and I'm sure many others, don't feel that that's currently the case. So recognising that you've set out a longer implementation period for macro change, what can constituents of ours expect to see in this Parliament in terms of improvement in some of that performance?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, we are at the moment, I think, at 2,400 extra neighbourhood police officers, are on track to meet the commitment to have 3,000 extra by the end of March. We'll see another increase in neighbourhood policing in the coming year as well, and we'll keep making progress towards our target of 13,000 extra neighbourhood officers. We've already rolled out the commitment for a named contactable officer in every neighbourhood in the country as well. So there are already changes that are happening that I think are the right changes and that can rebuild confidence in policing. Under the previous administration, there was a big change away from the powers of the Home Secretary and the Home Office itself in terms of its place within the policing system. So not just in the context of being able to remove a chief constable, which obviously came up in the context of the Maccabi Tel Aviv football match issue, but also the wider ability to set minimum standards, to have accountability, because it was taken away in place with police and crime commissioners. So the totality of the reforms on accountability and standards, the performance framework, that is designed to make sure that the whole of the service meets the standards that we would all rightly expect of it, and it gives the Home Secretary and the Home Office a much bigger role in making that happen.
Will that be coming in more quickly, you know, in the next year or two? Will people be able to start
so
seeing
we will legislate, and so some of these things require legislation, others less so, but obviously changing the powers of the Home Secretary and the requirements of policing leaders to report in centrally, I think that will require legislation. So hopefully as quickly as possible. I mean, I obviously am not hanging about, and I do want to get a move on, but necessarily some of the bigger structural changes, I think they will just take longer, and that is the right thing to do, because you don't want to impact on operational issues on the ground.
We're going to move on to neighbourhood policing with Margaret Mullane.
Yeah.
Thank you. The number of neighbourhood policing roles has gone up by 2,383, and the overall police workforce has fallen by 2,050 in the 12 months to September 2025. Are you happy with how the police workforce has changed in the year up to September 2025?
Look, I make no apology for prioritising neighbourhood policing. We saw that all but disappear under the previous administration, and we have made a policy commitment, manifesto commitments to bring that back. We believe in neighbourhood policing as the bedrock of good policing across the whole of the country. So I'm pleased to see the numbers of neighbourhood officers increasing. On headline numbers, I think I've made this point in the House as well as we were debating the white paper. There's been a big focus on overall headline numbers and less of a focus on what officers are doing. And I want to focus much more on what officers are doing and what other standards we are holding the police service to, rather than just the headline number. So I think your committee might have heard evidence before about the distorting effect of the officer maintenance grant. We've ended up with 12,000 officers in desk jobs, 250 warranted officers doing HR. That is not a sensible system, using its warranted police officers in the right way. So my focus is less on the headline number and much more on what those officers are doing. And again, the rest of the reforms I've announced are about making sure that the service that is being provided is to a very high standard, something the public can have confidence in, and that puts us in a better position to cut crime.
Bearing that in mind, I think everybody sitting here are all very supportive of neighbourhood policing. Who wouldn't be? But they're kind of having a named officer, like my local police force is the Met. So you'd have a named officer, but what isn't picked up at all, I did notice in the white paper there was a mention of it, is abstractions. So you could, the low-level crime, your shoplifting, that kind of thing as well, the sense of people feeling safe in their communities, which I know you feel very strongly about. Well, if they're not here, and that is quite often, isn't it? We had the previous Home Secretary, and it's tricky. I don't know what we're going to do about it. So I'd just be interested going forward on abstractions, because for communities like mine, it's very upsetting.
Well, let me come back to you specifically on abstractions, and I'm happy to write to you and also refer to your previous discussions with my predecessor. What I want to reassure you, though, is this is about making sure that in every community you get the same standard of service. I think we would all agree that there is very much a postcode lottery in terms of the service that different communities get across the country from the police for different types of crime. So in some police force areas, they make a real priority of going after the so-called low-level offences because they don't consider them low-level offences, and they know that if you crack down on that, you actually have a bigger impact on, offences at the more serious violence end of the spectrum. That doesn't happen everywhere. I want to make sure that wherever you live, whether you're in, beautiful countryside in an urban city like mine, doesn't really matter. You all know who your named contactable officer is. You know that your queries will be responded to in a reasonable time frame. You know that each type of crime will be prioritised because there'll be different people within the new model whose responsibility it is to go after that.
Certainly, I noticed you said about neighbourhood policing being hollowed out. That certainly wasn't the case in Staffordshire, and we've had our Police and Crime Commissioner there, and the Chief Constables over the years have been very determined to make sure that we have local policing. So I would just disagree respectfully on that point. Okay. But Paul Kohler has one...
But at a national level, I think we can agree that the numbers fell significantly.
Well,
at the very least.
But as I say, in Staffordshire, that certainly wasn't the case.
Thank you. Home Secretary, I'm sure you agree that for neighbourhood policing to work, policing to be accessible to the public. And I'm sure you will see that local police stations accessible to the public are a critical aspect of that. So what would you say to my constituents in the borough of Merton who are about to lose all their police front counters, so we have no accessibility to the police within Merton? Is that a sensible way forward?
Look, I'm not going to, I won't comment on individual cases like that because those are operational decisions for the local service to make, and those are their decisions to make, not for me to seek to dictate. I think those are local decisions made by others. What I would say is that, the totality of the reforms that we are rolling out as a government are about rebuilding neighbourhood policing as the absolute bedrock of the police service. So all of your constituents at neighbourhood level will have a named contactable officer and are expected to meet the 72-hour target for non-urgent, non-priority casework as well. So I hope that they will be seeing that much more localised service that they can avail themselves of.
You see local police stations as having a role in that accessibility?
They may or may not. That is a matter for local
You have
forces.
No opinion on the matter?
Well, it's a matter for local forces, I think, to make that decision.
But as Home Secretary, you have no view on police stations?
In my constituency, you know, we've lost police stations as well. As Home Secretary, it's my responsibility, I believe, as someone who believes in the power of neighbourhood policing, to restore neighbourhood policing and to make sure that we have a new regime of minimum standards that everyone everywhere can expect, and that is the same for your constituents as it is for mine.
Very quickly to finish off, grooming gangs, Robbie Moore.
Yeah, I just have two questions, Home Secretary. I just want to really understand why we're now well over a year since the initial announcement was made by the previous Home Secretary that we're going to be having 5 local inquiries, and the Home Secretary at the time was confident enough to reference Oldham at that point. We are now well over a year. We have got Baroness Longfield that has been appointed to do the national inquiry. But why is it, despite all of the information that's been given to the Home Office from myself and others and leading experts, that the Home Office isn't confident enough to announce Bradford district being included and having a specific spotlight on it, but yet happy enough to mention Oldham over a year ago?
Well, I think that the position a year ago was different to where we are today, and after I believe the previous Home Secretary made those comments, of course we had the Casey audit, and we moved to having a national inquiry. So I think the picture hasn't remained static in the year that you are referring to. We are moving ahead with the grooming gangs inquiry. We've been clear that the terms of reference, will deal with all of the issues related to grooming gangs and the concerns that people have. We've obviously got the chair in place. We're not far from being able to confirm those terms of reference. There'll be a consultation period, as is natural and normal in these circumstances. It will get underway very soon, and it will be allowed to carry on with its work. It's got a three-year programme of work. I know you and other members have lobbied for your areas to be included as part of the work that the grooming gangs inquiry will undertake, and I just repeat the position that I did in the chamber, which is it will be for the inquiry now and the chair to consider those areas. I'm sure she and the rest of the panel will have heard the desire for Bradford to be a part of that, but it will be wrong for me, now that we have an independent inquiry and a chair, to try to dictate where they go and where they don't go.
And finally, on a matter of detail, Baroness Casey's audit was very, very detailed and thorough. But on page 151, it specifically said within that audit that whilst the inquiry is being set up, the national inquiry is being set up, police forces and other relevant agencies should be, in the meantime, not required to destroy any relevant records relating to grooming gangs. Now, I've done a Freedom of Information request to West Yorkshire Police and to the Bradford Safeguarding Partnership. Both of those organisations have not received any formal directive from the Home Office asking for no grooming gang records to be destroyed, and specifically saying that those records should be retained for a national inquiry. Why has, and I put these points to the Permanent Secretary when we had her in front of the Select Committee, why has the Home Office not issued a direction to all safeguarding bodies?
I believe that direction has been issued. So
well, it's not been issued to West Yorkshire Police and Bradford Safeguarding.
Let me take that back, because it did come up before, and it was our understanding, and it remains my understanding today that everybody that needed to have been written to has been written to be told to protect all records for the purposes of the inquiry. So I will check that and get back to you and write.
I think that alarm told us that this was we'd hit midday.
Mr. Murray's alarm.
Yes, exactly. We're very good as a committee to making sure we all know what we're doing. Thank you so much, Home Secretary, for coming. We will look forward to seeing you in a very short order, I'm sure, for more questions.
It's a year, according to Mr. Murray.
Definitely sooner than that. But I'll bring this to a conclusion. Order, order.